Alright guys, so hi, my name is Jordan, and I'm here to talk about piracy and anime, and not just One Piece. So my chosen research topic was, how is the anime industry able to sustain itself despite piracy, and by that I mean widespread piracy on a global scale and even domestically in Japan. Um, and how can piracy be countered, sort of slash should it be countered, with the sub-question being, how can our anime protagonists succeed despite um, how awesome our adversary is, and by that I mean um, how commonplace piracy is. Right, it's one of the first things that you see when you Google free or anime streaming. Right, it's literally one of the third things is a Reddit post discussing how the best ways to stream anime for free. So, why piracy anime? Why did I choose to talk about this? The first and foremost thing is that I have an interest in cybersecurity and IP law, copyright infringement, things like that. The second is that I'm a fan of anime. I would like to see the industry continue to succeed, and I wanted to learn a little bit more about the factors that allow it to succeed. I came into this initially thinking that diehard fans, like the one portrayed, sort of would enable the animation industry to survive and sustain itself, and that piracy would enhance its availability. And I also figured that this would this fan base would buy into the anime, right? Furthering its sustainability and profits. Um, so that's what I came in knowing. I came in, just to reiterate, thinking they would support the industry, right? What I learned was a little bit different, but I'll talk about that in a second. First, I'll talk about my methodology. So I had initially come to this without an idea of what to research and how to go about researching it, but I came to learn some things pretty quickly. First is that journals and scholarly articles are very helpful when you want to find things about piracy and internet piracy and media piracy and IP law and international copyright treaties and treatises and things of that nature. It's a little bit less useful when you want to find information specifically about how that applies to anime, but there's a lot of inferences that can be made, and there is actually some data on anime and manga lost due to piracy. But I didn't just use journals and scholarly articles. I also used YouTube videos, internet forums, internet polls, and news articles as some sources of information. So the first thing I'll talk about is piracy domestically in Japan. So they have strict anti-piracy laws. People can be arrested. There have been sentences of at least 10 years for distributing to popular file sharing networks in Japan, and they do their best to hunt down and seek out distributors and people who sort of propagate this content, this illegally obtained content within Japan. And just recently, in March of 2019, right, the Japanese government was attempting to draft legislation or get legislation passed, which would allow them to make it illegal to click on links that would take you to illegally obtained copyrighted content. And this carried a penalty of up to 2 years in prison, which is a really strict sentence for something that is really commonplace in other markets. And so one of the first things I learned, besides that Japan is pretty strict on piracy, is that anime fans do not care. So the way I learned this was that YouTubers actually took polls from their fans to see how many people were pirating anime, at least in the Western space. And granted, it was a small sample size. It was 13,000 people, but 83% of them had pirated content, anime content. And the reasons why are they have to do a lot with exclusivity, making markets sort of difficult to navigate for consumers. They make them more consumer unfriendly because they're essentially monopolizing content. And in opposition to that, you have the fact that piracy is easy to access, free, and doesn't pose a threat. Like no one in the global market is going to get arrested. Domestically in Japan, though, bundling practices make it harder to escape other purchases, which could lead people to pirating content, right? So that brings up the question, an important question, or one of the questions I'd ask is piracy hurting the industry? And the answer to this was yes. Inevitably, there's some loss. An example of this is in manga, where it was estimated that 1.3 trillion yen was lost in 2017 to piracy globally. On a domestic scale, this was like 17.1 billion yen, but that's because Japan's markets for manga and anime are shrinking as the younger population, or the size of the youth population decreases. But piracy does have some benefits, and these benefits are seen through lots of different markets, but it does create sort of a invisible competitor for lots of markets. And so the idea is, especially online and in lots of internet forums, that sites like Crunchyroll and anime streaming sites will need to innovate to attract customers, thereby improving the experience for customers, right? And then I would also argue that the market growth in anime, in the animation industry, Japanese animation industry, speaks for itself. And this is because a large portion of Japanese anime industry revenue and profit is made from related merchandise. We learned this in week 14, but I also found a lot about this from the AJA's Japanese Anime Industry Report of 2017. And it really demonstrates the idea that anime functions as promotional media and material for other content, right? So the AGA reported that the Japanese animation industry grew by 30% from 2016 to 2017. It was on the order of like 8.86 billion yen. And a large reason for this, and one of the ending notes of my slides, is that streaming services are picking up, right? So Western streaming services are picking up anime from these producers and creators, from these Japanese animation companies, which spikes that growth. And so, as you can see, I stated that 8.1 or $8.8 billion was made. That's up 30% from 6.79 billion. Sorry, I think before I had said yen, but it was actually $1 billion, not yen. So yeah, it's tripled since 2014, but it's 30% up from the previous year. And so you can see these streaming sites sort of bringing in money for the animation industry, helping it survive in spite of this piracy, or maybe because of this piracy, maybe because it helps these companies in the West recognize that there is a market there. There's a market there that they would like to capture and that they should be interested in. And so my conclusion is simplified for the presentation, just for time, but I mostly came to the conclusion that the industry survives because of related merchandise. I found lots of things supporting that the anime itself wasn't the main cause, or wasn't the main profit generator. Anime are often made because of manga. They're often made to sell other products. Like a good example of this is Pokemon, which has an anime and has manga because it was such a successful video game, right? Like anime is seen as a marketing tool to further that video game, to further another thing that a company was doing and make more money that way. And then the other thing that I found was that piracy helps spread the industry, the animation industry, at least on a global scale, and it creates positive changes in markets. There was some research in how you can restrict piracy, and in some cases this backfired, in some cases this didn't. On the whole, though, having more laws and then a respect for laws within the country were the biggest indicators of whether or not you could stop piracy, or prohibit it, not stop, sort of lessen its impact. Thanks for listening, guys.